In this video, we are going to talk about how scared I was of my feelings in my fearful avoidant days. I am Pauline and I am so happy you are here because when I'm making these videos, when I'm thinking of um, topics for the videos that can really help you, or I'm finding ways to help you even more, sometimes I really tune back into what it felt like to be in the crash state of my fearful avoidant attachment style. And one thing that came up as I was doing that the other day, I realized just how scared I was of my feelings. And right now, that is such a different reality. I am not scared of my feelings at all anymore. There is no feeling that could scare me. And it's so radically different. And so I wanted to just make a sit down chat video about this because I want you to know what is possible and that you can definitely heal this, and that whatever you are feeling right now doesn't mean that you are going to feel that the rest of your life. Absolutely not. So I think always from when I was very young, I learned to suppress feelings, and I think a lot of fearful avoidance have learned that. So when I was, I think 4 or 5, or maybe even 2, I don't even know. Um, I would hear, "Don't cry, don't be a baby," all the cliche things, dismissive things, and I wasn't really allowed to be um, sad. I wasn't allowed to cry. I wasn't allowed to be angry. I wasn't allowed to be really frustrated. Any powerful portrayal of emotion was just not really allowed and mostly met with anger. And therefore, I started suppressing feelings. When I grew a little bit older, I also adopted this belief that feeling sad or crying was actually weak, and being weak was being incapable and just a recipe for rejection and abandonment. Um, and I was not really allowed to have a reaction to not liking things. So when my parents would put up a boundary and I would be angry or frustrated or cry, I wasn't allowed to have that. So it's when you again and again have this negative reaction to whatever emotion or feeling you have, when you experience that, it's so logical that after a while you're like, okay, apparently I'm not allowed to feel. My feelings are not allowed to be there. And they made me feel like I was wrong for having feelings, that those feeling just having feelings was a bad thing, that I was a bad person for having them, and I was called sensitive or oversensitive or dramatic, or um and so I kind of started hating my feelings and hating my emotions. And that turned into me going through puberty and not crying at all from the time that I was 12 to the time I was 20 when I met my now husband. I just not haven't cried. I don't remember crying once. Um and with all the hormonal changes, that's quite hard to not cry. And I remember that sometimes I would be so frustrated or I would be so sad and I would want to cry, but it was like there was this really heavy lid that was put on that emotion. Like, I'm not allowed to be sad or frustrated. I'm definitely not allowed to cry. If there would be tears welling up in my eyes, I would feel weak. I would almost go into a panic. I'm not allowed to do this. Um, yeah, I would feel like I was losing control, because that's what my parent would call it. If somebody displayed any emotions, it would be losing control. They were losing control. And so what I had to do was be in control of my feelings all the time, not knowing that that is impossible because feelings come and go and they are not supposed to be controlled. That's not the way to deal with feelings. That just leads to a whole array of mental health issues, which I definitely experienced when I was in my 20s with OCD, and mostly relationship OCD, but actually 8 different types of OCD. Looking back on it, hadn't had a clue when I was in the middle of it. Um, and depression, clinical depression, generalized anxiety. Um, and I remember when I was in my 20s and I met my now husband and boyfriend, and he allowed all my emotions. He had a hard time allowing or holding space for anger. He allowed me to completely have it, but he was just, that kind of triggered something with him. But being sad and crying was completely fine. And so I remember the first few times that I cried when I was 21, 20 or 21, it was hysterical. I would just cry for an hour and it would be over something seemingly small, which is so interesting because if you have this belief that you lose control when you show emotion, when you cry, when you get angry, or it was mostly when people would cry. Now that I think of it, anger was a more allowed emotion if my parent would display it, not if I would display it. So when I cried for the first time, it was hysterical. The first few times were hysterical. And that kind of was proof to me that when you lose control, it's like it's all out there, and I am dramatic and I am overly sensitive, because who cries like that? I would just cry my eyes out for an hour. And my sweet, sweet boyfriend, husband, would just sit there and hold me and just hold space and just completely allow me to cry, not say, oh shush, it's all okay, it's gonna be okay, you just shush now. He just allowed all the tears. But what I noticed after those first few hysterical crying sessions, that the times after that, it was way less intense. It was all this pent up um, sadness, really, of years and years and years and years that just came out. But still, I had such a hard time crying. Every time I felt that coming up, it was like there was a multi-layer mechanism to push that down. So it started at like my rib cage, where my rib cage began. That was like there was a lid there that just pushed it down. And when it came up more, it would be pushed down like right here. I would try so hard to not let it come any further. And then when I couldn't hold that, it would almost like the tears would well up in my eyes, and I would do everything to not have that happen. And so I would turn to anger. And looking back on it, I think it was a good thing that my husband actually wasn't very comfortable with anger, because that was my go-to to not feel the sadness and to not cry. I would get angry, lash out, and if my husband would have played that game with me, would have become angry too, I don't know what I would have done. I think we would have had a very toxic relationship. But he could not do anything with my anger. It just made him insecure, and he would be there for me. He wouldn't like go away or pull back. It was just, I could see how much it hurt him. So he got insecure, but he was just very vulnerable in that insecurity. And oh, that just broke my heart, and I didn't want to be that person. And so I had to take responsibility for that and allow myself to be vulnerable and cry and really feel what was under the anger. So this just, for years, it was such a process of allowing all my emotions and feelings to be there, because every time something came up, it felt like this whole ball of yarn that was just there was so much going on. I couldn't even identify it as sadness or anger or frustration. I had no idea how to label my emotions. I had no idea what was happening. And so it would all come out at once, and all I knew was anger and frustration. So it would come out as that, and I think my parent had that too. And so that's what they taught me. So um, it wasn't until I think 2 years into my healing journey, and mind you, I had no idea I had the fearful avoidant attachment style. I had no idea I had these mental health issues. I had no idea what was going on. So all of it took me so long, but it really does not have to take that long. But I think it took about 2 years to start really allowing my feelings and to not judge them for being wrong, and to separate the me feeling dumb and incapable from the emotion that I was feeling. So I remember so well that I went to a therapist that I started seeing about 6 months into my relationship with my now husband, when I started healing. And um and she asked me, like, what do you think, where you would be if you're enlightened? Because I was kind of obsessed with becoming, well, not obsessed with becoming enlightened, but just obsessed with getting to a state where I would be perfect and not have any problems anymore. And I told her, like, I would not have any bad emotions. I would just be happy. I would just be content. I would just be peaceful. And she said, I don't think that that's what enlightenment or whatever is. I think it means you just allow all the feelings and emotions to be there without any judgment. And I remember looking at her and thinking, no, that's not true. That is not what that is. You don't understand it. I definitely felt better than her in that moment, and I walked out of that session thinking, no, I am going to find a way to only have the good feelings, the happy feelings, the positive feelings. And years on, I had to accept that that's just not the reality of being human. That being human means having all emotions and having all feelings. And now, 14 years later, I know that you can get to a point where whatever feeling comes up, even if it's the really hard ones, like shame and guilt, um, they don't they don't feel negative. It's hard to explain this. They don't feel like, back then I would judge them, I would suppress them, I would not allow myself to have these emotions. I would feel like I'm a bad person for having these. I wouldn't be able to control my emotions, and that was a bad thing. And now it's just there, and I allow it to come up, and I don't even really notice it anymore at times. And fully allowing all your feelings and emotions is so freeing, because there's no picking which ones are right or which ones are wrong, which I did continuously and only when I was a child, when I was going through puberty, when I was a teenager, um and in my 20s. I would say this feeling is wrong, this emotion is wrong, that feeling is good. And when there would be a good feeling like happiness or contentment or whatever, I would want to hold on to it. I felt like I had to hold on to it really hard. Um, and I would be so disappointed if that I didn't succeed in that. And now I know that that's just not the nature of feelings. And the nature of feelings is that they come and go. It's ebb and flow. And you cannot, even if you try really hard, control that. It's just not possible, and it's not necessarily necessary, because your peace is not in controlling your emotions, but being um, the vessel, the empty vessel for those emotions. So I started seeing it more as um, like a sea can be very rough. There can be so many waves really high crashing waves. But when you go deeper into the sea, it's quiet, it's still. And that's how I started seeing it more, or I would see it as I'm the sky and these emotions are just clouds, and sometimes they're thunder clouds, but they pass. And all I have to do is just allow them to pass. Mm, and that really helped. And then of course I found EFT, the emotional freedom technique, and that's literally what it does. It frees your emotions from being stuck, because if you're used to suppressing your feelings and emotions for years and years and years and years, they just get stuck in your body, in your energy system, if you will. And so that method really helped me to release all this stored emotions, stored feelings, and that just freed up so much. um yeah, everything. It felt like I was taking loads off my shoulders, and life just became easier and simpler and lighter and more happy. And the more I allowed my feelings, the less I was scared of anything. Because okay, the title of this video is how scared I was of my feelings. I remember that when I was scared of my feelings, it felt like I would go crazy. I was so scared of going crazy when I was in my 20s, because I just wanted to suppress all of this, and I just couldn't. It all came up and it came out, and I obviously was losing control, and I just wanted to. I really genuinely thought I was going crazy and I would have to be institutionalized, and I'm not saying that lightly. Um, I would just not know what to do anymore. I would lay in bed and I would have all these feelings, and do everything I could to suppress them, either consciously or unconsciously. And it was like a prison. It really was like a prison of me feeling like I'm going crazy, and my fear brain, that part that is trying to protect you, working over hours trying to make me feel safe in whatever way, trying to project it onto my relationship. The relationship is a problem. You have to leave the relationship, and then you'll be fine, then you'll feel fine. And there was just something inside me that knew, no, that's not the way. There's something else. And yeah, but I really truly felt like if I would allow all my feelings, I would go crazy. And also, if I would allow my feelings, it felt like definitely bad things would happen. And the thing is, when you're an adult, you don't, it's not that you feel all of this and you think, oh, well, that's because my dad or my mom was incapable of teaching me about emotions or allowing me to have emotions. What you take from your childhood is just emotions are bad, feelings are bad, and it becomes this dark cloud and this threatening thing. And so when you're an adult, you seek other reasons or ways to deal with this. So the thoughts I had was that my relationship was bad, and that was the reason I was feeling this way. And I felt like if I allowed all my emotions and feelings, then bad things would happen. Like I would find out that Aryan, my husband, wasn't the one, and that was like the threatening thing that I felt all the time, because the threat of my parents becoming really angry was gone. It wasn't there anymore. And so it kind of projected onto my relationship that, okay, you're not allowed to feel all your feelings. And when I was a child, that was because my parent would get really angry. And now it was, you're not allowed to feel your feelings, because then you will figure out that, or you will realize that he is not the one, and you have to leave the relationship, and then you hurt him, and then you might regret it, and it had all these bad consequences. So the feeling of that threat that something bad was going to happen just because I allowed my feelings, that was there, but the story around it that my fear brain told me was different. And so it never really helps to analyze the story and really go with all the thoughts, because the mechanism is deeper. And that really kept me from allowing myself the feelings. And I remember that I read somewhere that it is good to allow all your feelings. And I remember I thought, okay, I'm going to try that. And if I realize that he is not the one, then that's just what it is. And I said that, but I was so scared. But I was so determined that I was going to get out of this and heal this, that I did try. And it was right before I had one of my classes that I really had to go to, which was not perfect timing. And I just laid in bed and I said to myself, okay, I'm just going to allow all my feelings. And this wave just came up of all these feelings that I had been suppressing for years. And I had a panic attack. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I had such a heavy feeling on my chest. I was dizzy, almost fainting. Um, I just couldn't do it. It was way too much to do that in that short amount of time. And so that's how scary it was to just allow my feelings. And then as I healed more and more, I got to a point through really truly through the emotional freedom technique that just kind of helps you release those emotions, that I had this epiphany after a long time that, wait, they're just feelings. They don't they don't mean anything. And I assigned meaning up to that point to every single feeling and to every single emotion. There was nothing that I wouldn't assign meaning to and then would get scared of what it would mean and then what the consequences would be and who I would hurt with that. And then I just thought, wait, they are just feelings. And my body just feels those feelings. And I don't have to do anything with them. Because you have so many feelings and so many emotions that are truly just fleeting. These weird thoughts that just pop in your head, and just if you don't pay attention to it, they're gone. And the same with feelings. Like sometimes you feel this rage out of nowhere. And you have no idea what that came from. And when you're scared of your feelings, you go and find the reason. You're like, why am I feeling so much rage? It must have a reason. And then your fear brain is like, that's your relationship. Your relationship is not right. And so it becomes um this analytical search for every single feeling, while it's okay to just allow that rage to just pass through you. You don't even really have to know why. And looking back, I realized that, or at a certain point, I realized that 95% of my feelings were just emotional flashbacks. They were just feelings of triggers of my past. Um, and that just freed up so much. I don't have to nitpick. I don't have to figure this all out. I don't have to know what my feelings mean or what I have to do with them. And before I couldn't do that because it felt like I wouldn't be truthful to myself. Like I would be lying to myself if I didn't take every single feeling very, very, very seriously. So yeah, it's if I would have feelings come up, I would suppress them immediately, and I would start to feel anxiety and panic. Um, I had straight up panic attacks when I would try to allow my feelings, and it felt so heavy. It felt so heavy to always have to suppress these feelings and um and not being allowed to have them. And now my feelings are just there. I almost want to say they're like my friends. They are allowed to be there, and uh they don't hinder me at all. Even if I don't feel good for a day, that's fine. Then I don't feel good for a day. If I feel anger, I feel anger. If I feel rage, I feel rage. And I don't act on it, so my behavior is not well, I'm not perfect, obviously, so sometimes I might snap a little bit, um, but it's not like rage anymore or lashing out at all. That has been years. um, yeah, but I don't mind feeling any feeling right now, and that is incredibly liberating. Incredibly liberating. That means that there's nothing really I'm very scared of. So yeah, my body and my head are just they're they're good places to be. I'm not saying they're always happy and it's like roses and butterflies all the time, because that's not realistic. But the negative feelings that I would label as negative would feel so heavy when I was in a crash state, and now they don't feel heavy anymore. So I see that, this is anger, or this is frustration, or this is guilt, and this is shame. But it's like they're just a different energy from being happy, if that makes sense. So I just recognize the different vibration of it, the different kind of sensation of it. Um, and that's pretty much it. I don't judge it anymore. I don't try to fix it. Yeah, yeah. So that's where I am now, and that's how scared I was of my feelings. And I'm so incredibly grateful and thankful that I healed, and I did all that, even if I didn't believe I deserved it. I didn't know where I was going with it. It's My life is like a million times better, truly. Now, and it didn't say anything about my worth. It didn't say anything about what kind of person I was. It was just for me, and the healing was just for me. Um, so yeah, I just want you to know that that's possible, and it really does not have to take years. It really does not have to take 14 years, because there's so much more known now about the fearful avoidant attachment style, about emotions, about everything, um, than when I started healing 14 years ago. So if you've been following me for longer, probably know I have an online program called Heal and Happy. Uh, if you want to check that out, you can find more information in the link in the description. I don't ever want you to feel like you have to. You can heal. There are so many ways to heal. I just want you to know that there's like a step-by-step program that if you want to really dive deep now, that's possible. And it really doesn't have to take years. It really, really doesn't. All right. I wish you so much peace through any emotion and any feeling, because that's very well possible. Let me know in the comments below if this story was valuable, if you have any more things you want to hear from me, because I know that if I'm struggling with something, I always look for the personal stories, like how people overcame it. So if you have any specific personal questions, let me know. As always, I'm happy you are here, and I will see you in the next one.